Hello, everyone. We will wait just for a minute for everyone to come in, and then we will start this session. Um, just wondering whether the other session is over now or whether we should wait a bit longer. Okay, I I guess people will still join as we start this session. But since we have limited time, maybe we can get started. I would like to welcome you all to the launch of the Nijmegen Agenda for Transformative Inter- and Transdisciplinarity in Earth System Governance. My name is Sander Chan. I'm an assistant professor at Radboud University in Nijmegen in the Netherlands. And last year, I had the great privilege to manage um, the 2023 Radboud Conference on Earth System Governance, together with my colleagues Birka Wikke, Professor Birka Wikke, and Professor Ingrid Visra-Hamakers. Sorry, I'm sharing the wrong presentation here. Apologies. There we go. So last year's Earth System Governance Conference had a slogan, and the slogan was Bridging Sciences and Societies for Sustainability Transformations. We didn't choose this by accident. Bridging Sciences and Societies emphasized the importance of connecting scientific knowledge and real-world action. We wanted to ensure that research in our community also reaches other communities to jointly work towards a more resilient and equitable future. To make a lasting impact, the 2023 Radboud Conference on Earth System Governance kicked off a process to develop the Nijmegen Agenda. Through a collaborative and consultative process, a collective vision was developed for the future of Earth System governance to foster collaboration between researchers, practitioners, and civil society. The agenda sets out priorities and principles for advancing interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity to tackle global environmental governance challenges. And we hope that the agenda will inspire new, more inclusive and integrated ways of addressing the complex sustainability challenges that we're facing today. You will find the Nijmegen Agenda on the website of the Earth System Governance Project, but allow me to very briefly convey some key points from that agenda. Among other things, the Nijmegen Agenda on the website that you find on the website will set up 5 principles for researchers and educators to foster meaningful, impactful, and socially responsible interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity. First, interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity should prioritize sustainability transformations, aiming to generate knowledge and implement actions that drive meaningful change. This requires acknowledging the need to reconfigure power relations, rethink economic, social, and cultural structures, and redefine our connections with nature, human and non-human animals. Second, to achieve transformative interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity, it's crucial for us researchers and educators to recognize our own positionality. This means being aware of our personal perspectives and acknowledging the views of others. We must be ready to challenge our own assumptions about other disciplines and societal actors, and critically examine our methods and avoid implicit biases and routine methods that may carry blind spots and hinder politically and socially engaged knowledge production. Third, transformative inter- and transdisciplinarity requires acknowledging and fostering pluralism and a multiplicity of knowledge systems, encompassing different disciplines, cultural perspectives, and forms of expertise, and valuing that each system brings unique perspectives. Integrating these perspectives can be challenging and time-consuming, but it's essential to explore these differences rather than avoid them, and to foster an inclusive environment that respects and draws from this diversity. Fourth, transformative inter- and transdisciplinarity aims to include all relevant disciplines and societal actors. This does not only mean involving key academic fields, but also engaging diverse stakeholders, policymakers, practitioners, and affected communities. Inclusiveness should be embedded throughout all stages of research, education, and action, from project design to implementation to evaluation to outreach. And finally, transformative inter- and transdisciplinarity must address structural inequalities by empowering underrepresented and marginalized groups, both human and non-human. This involves reshaping power dynamics and promoting justice for these groups. We can prevent the continuation of inequalities by recasting relationships between human, nature, and animals. It's also essential to be mindful of the influence of politically and economically powerful stakeholders and the leverage they have in shaping problems and solutions. So, how do we move from these principles to actually practicing transformative inter- and transdisciplinarity? To help us explore, I'm thrilled to introduce an outstanding panel of experts who bring diverse perspectives and extensive experience in the field. I will briefly present them to you. First, my colleague Anne van Veen has a unique background that blends arts and sciences. She studied interdisciplinary social sciences in Utrecht University, followed by dance at Artes University of the Arts and at Creative College. And then she went on to do art policy and management at Utrecht University. After working as a freelance dance artist, performing, teaching, and choreographing, Anne transitioned into academia, and in 2016 she began to pursue her PhD at Utrecht University, where she combined traditional scientific research with choreographic research. Now, as a postdoctoral researcher at Radboud University, Anne continues to explore intersections between science and the arts. Sorry. And then we are also joined by Gillian Student, who is a postdoctoral researcher at WIMAC, which stands for Wageningen Institute for Environment and Climate Research, where she has been instrumental in developing inter- and transdisciplinary methods and theory. Her work includes advising on co-creation, living labs, and citizens science, supporting the design of research projects and advancing transdisciplinary approaches within WIMAC's PhD program. Gillian is also an international transdisciplinary alliance member. That's a research and community platform for transdisciplinarity, working with an international team on developing transdisciplinary curriculums aimed at addressing societal challenges related to sustainable development. She also serves as the managing editor of the Journal of Integrative Environmental Sciences, giving scientific direction to the journal to promote research that integrates SDGs. And then we have also on the panel, Jonathan Pickering. He is associate professor at the Canberra School of Politics, Economics and Society at the University of Canberra, where he teaches international relations. His research interests include democracy and justice in environmental governance with a focus on climate change and energy. And before his academic career, he worked as a policy and program manager with Australia's International Development Program, AusAid. We also, of course, know Jonathan in the Earth System Governance community as a senior research fellow, who is currently also serving as co-chair of the scientific steering committee of the project. And finally, we are honored to also welcome Cornelia Kroek, science liaison for the University Research Priority Program on Global Change and Biodiversity at the University of Zurich, and the director of the Biodiscovery Global Research Program of Future Earth. She's also the driving force behind the World Biodiversity Forum. That's an international transdisciplinary conference that brings together researchers, practitioners, and societal actors to explore sustainable solutions to address the biodiversity crisis. Cornelia's work takes place at the science policy interface and involves synthesizing biodiversity research and strengthening the links between science policy and society. Cornelia also plays key roles in global biodiversity initiatives, including the IPBES task force on data knowledge, and serves on several Future Earth steering committees, among them the Pathways initiatives. So without further ado, I suggest that we go into the presentations via panel. First, Anne, let me unshare the screen so we see you. You're an artist, researcher, and activist who integrates traditional scientific research with other disciplines. What are lessons that you can share with us today to help us reach out better across disciplines, across sectors even, and maybe also across the human-animal divide?
Yes, thank you, Sander. Let me just, I have a presentation, so let me put it in sharing mode. And hopefully you're all seeing the big screen now. Yeah, so thank you for the introduction, Sander, and for your question. I will answer all of it, hopefully, within this presentation. And hopefully you also see that what I am going to talk about really aligns very well with the summary of the Nijmegen Agenda Sander was just giving. Just for a little bit of background, as Sander said, I'm a postdoc at Radboud University, and there I'm part of a transdisciplinary consortium researching the transition towards a sustainable food system in the Netherlands. And then within that project, my focus is on accelerating the governance of that transition, and specifically on how to include non-human animals in that transition and to figure out what a just future food system would be for different non-human animals, for example, cows, which is the species featuring in this presentation. So last Earth System Governance Conference, last year in Nijmegen, I staged a performative experiment called Democracy. And this is one of the ways I try to figure out how we can achieve a just food system for, in this case, specifically cows, and how can we figure out what it even means and what justice means to other animals. I will go into more detail about that experiment soon, but first I will give a little bit of theoretical background. Yeah, so within political philosophy, there is this idea that non-human animals are also political actors, and that they are not included in political decision-making and democracy currently, with the exception of maybe some indigenous societies, but certainly not in the Netherlands. It's not because they're not capable of it, but because we don't recognize them as political actors, as humans. And then the idea is that we should work towards an interspecies democracy in which other animals also have a voice. And that is recognized, and that is the only way to achieve a society that is just for all the animals in it. And a helpful distinction made in this theory is between micro and macro agency. So with micro agency, you can think of a cow living in a dairy farm, and then that cow can, if it's lucky, and some cows decide, oh, do I go outside today or do I stay inside the barn? So that is a small decision in daily life. But the cow, she cannot decide, oh, I don't want to be a dairy cow, or I want to stay with my child and raise it myself and live with other cows in the forest. So that's macro agency, decisions that affect the larger dimension of your life. And cows are capable of those decisions, but in the human-cow relations are now so that the expression of that agency is completely foreclosed for cows because of human dominance over them. And because of this power inequality and the omnipresence of anthropocentrism in society, it's also very difficult, or if not impossible, for humans to understand what matters to cows because they have no opportunity to express it. And so epistemic failure and injustice and humility are very important concepts within this theory. So they say we need epistemic humility and not assume that what we think matters to cows. So what you often see in, for example, policy processes is that either cows are not acknowledged at all, or they then interview cow farmers to ask what is important to cows, assuming that they would know, even though they have a very big economic interest in cows staying at the farm. So the idea is that we need some sort of ways for cows to directly represent their own interests. And then there is some theory more about transformative learning and the arts, and that is if we want to change these deeply ingrained beliefs such as anthropocentrism, or that other animals are not political actors, are not capable of macro agency, then we can use tools such as narratives and theater and artistic tools to arouse doubt about these deeply ingrained beliefs by fostering cross-species perspective taking. So you can read factual information about a cow, but that does not have the same effect as when you're asked to, for example, embody a cow in a play, or read a story from the perspective of a cow, or even a story from the perspective of a human that has a lot of empathy for a cow. And then the embodied aspect, especially of, for example, theater, is very important because then we can relate more easily than in a more linguistic way to cows, unless you're very familiar with cow language, but most people aren't, because we share a lot physically. So hunger, thirst, pain, fear, friendship are all things that we also experience in our bodies. So that is why that was also an important part of the democracy experiment. So what is democracy? It's a mock citizens' assembly based on the real citizens' assembly where future generations are already represented. But now a part of the group was asked to represent cows, and the another part was asked to represent a future generation. And then their task was to think about how cows and humans would live together in 2050 in the Achterhoek, which is a rural region in the Netherlands where there's a lot of dairy farming. And they had to come up with a future vision for cows and humans living together in that region, and then backcast to think of policy measures and regulations that would lead to that future vision. And there were 4 preparatory sessions of half a day where they received input from experts, human and cow. So they visited cows to get to know some actual cows, but there was also, for example, a landscape architect that explained how the landscape would change if our diet would change and how cows lived would change. And then we also did theater and storytelling exercises. So one important aspect of the whole project was that each human created a biography of either a cow or a future child, and each session they would add something to that biography. So they would learn, for example, about all the different physical conditions that cows have, and then they would think, oh, well, my cow has this sort of body and she would want this and that to be different. And we also acted out how the future would be. So there would be a conversation in the future where a future cow and a future child were interviewed, and they were saying, oh, we're best friends, and they were talking about what they liked about each other. And so the idea is that then the future is not just an idea, but it can really be experienced, so that the imagination of what can be is expanded. And the aim of this experiment was, first of all, to see if there's any potential for indirect representation of cows and other non-humans in citizens' assemblies, if that has the potential to further justice for these animals. And on the other hand, also, if this has the potential to be a transformative learning experience for the participants, to see if it can change their ideas about cows, for example. Now, quickly about the findings. So the participants were all interviewed after the experiments, and here are 4 main findings. So first of all, there was this huge fear of anthropomorphizing, especially at the beginning of the project. So the participants were amateur theater enthusiasts, and most of them already cared quite a lot about other animals, but they all had this fear of being accused of anthropomorphizing, and they found it really difficult to trust their instincts about what mattered to cows, or if something would bother a cow. And then there's already a lot of research about things that stresses cows out, and then using that we found that their instincts were really correct all along. So then that helped them to trust their instincts more and more. And then we visited the cows, and they were like, yeah, of course they get upset when they take their calf away. The research shows it, but also being together with these calves and these cows, how can I not trust what I'm feeling right now? So that went away during the process, that fear. And then they also told me that their imagination was really expanded, because at the beginning or before the project, they were really thinking, okay, industrial agriculture is bad, but they were not really thinking about, okay, but how would it be different if we start from the cow perspective? So would they want to live in a big group or a small group? Would they want to live in the forest, or what sort of landscape would they want to live in? Would they still want to have contact with humans, and with humans? Would there be individual differences? So they were thinking about a whole host of new questions about the lives of cows. And then they also start to see cows differently. So not just as a species, but also as individuals, because once you get to know cows, you see that they're all individuals, and some are really shy, others are really social. And they also started to think of cows as capable of political acts, as capable of as participants in democracy. So it's not just that they saw individuals, but also individuals with all kinds of capabilities and with knowledge about their own life and their desired lives. And this also led to behavior change. So, for example, someone not being able to buy non-vegan cheese anymore after the project. And then as a result of the assembly itself, you don't have to read all this, but this all the policy measures that they came up with, and it really also reflects their new ideas about cows and humans. So it starts with just basically banning all the breeding and killing and owning of cows, but it also includes funding for an experiment to find out what matters to cows, mandatory cow communication, courses for politicians, etc. So it really goes beyond stop hurting them and to start listening to them. Now I want to go to what we have learned from this a bit more generally. So I think the artistic aspect of research can really help to make radically different futures tangible and experienceable, both for participants and also audience members. It can also engage a broader audience because it does not require that you can read academic papers, for example. In the past, I've also done a performative installation that also was visited by young children, for example. And it also raises new questions. Once you start acting out the day in the life of a cow, you think of all kinds of new questions that you not necessarily have when you're reading a paper, for example. And it fosters cross-species empathy and creates space for non-humans as knowledgeable, as you saw with the participants in this experiment that now think, yes, we should work towards an interspecies democracy. And then if I think a bit more about Earth system governance and the conference that I participated in, what do we then need if we want more of this? So very practically, we need spaces and time and budget to develop these kinds of things. So if I think about last year's conference, it was great that I was given the opportunity for this, but it was also in a very standard location of just sort of a classroom location. And I think with these sort of things, the impact is so much greater if you can have a space that contributes to the whole experience of being there. So I think then we also need to rethink our academic conferences, and do we still need the sort of classic format of having all these presentations and lectures and then add on a walk here and a theater piece here, or do we dare to radically change that structure as well? And then more broadly, I think this is just also in alignment with the Nijmegen Agenda, is that we need to broaden our understanding of what is knowledge and who is knowledgeable and who can co-produce knowledge together and extend that beyond the human. And that can be part of really early on education, not just in universities, but also primary schools where we maybe don't teach that humans are not animals, for example. And then finally on research inclusive of non-human perspectives. So we can now start already with acknowledging them as stakeholders and adding embodiment and attunement practice to research methods. So recently I've done, for example, an embodied critical discourse analysis instead of just a critical discourse analysis, which start with attuning to non-human animals, and then from that perspective doing a critical discourse analysis. But eventually, if you want to move beyond epistemic injustice, we need to breaking down of those structural inequalities that are a barrier to inclusion of other animals. And that was my final comment. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna, for highlighting the need for interspecies democracy, and also like this need for epistemic humility, as you call it. Then I would like to ask Gillian to take the virtual floor. Gillian, you have been very active also last year at the ESG conference and helped to co-facilitate with us an innovative session as part of the process towards the Nijmegen Agenda. What insights can you share on co-creation, especially also in relation to education and transdisciplinarity?
Thank you, Sander, and also thank you last year for the opportunity to be part of the Nijmegen Agenda. And I'm really looking forward to sharing some of the insights that I had by participating. So I'm just have to change my screen for just a moment. Let's see, it's the awkward pause on my behalf. Okay, here we are. So I'd like to share this the journey that I got to take on, and this journey was already happening within the ESG community, and I had the kind of honor to be invited to be part of that. And I chose this background screen of these arrows going in different directions because I think that's something that is very much a part of transformation and inter and transdisciplinarity. It's which way are we going? Which arrows have the most push and pull? How do we decide what are sustainable transformations, especially as we are going through them and don't necessarily know what the product of them are? So unfortunately, it's not a pathway or a very visible pathway to these transformations. It's not even just one-off, but the decisions that we make today in our ideas of our visions for the future of ESG are really important for how we will, where we will go forward. And recognizing my positionality and how I look at inter and transdisciplinary, I just want to very quickly highlight a few things that I think are really important that I notice get taken for granted when I start to talk about them with in different audiences. So one, just two, I think, key things are looking at, or three maybe key things, is one, the kind of challenge that you're looking at. And so in this screen, I'm showing a box, like this empty box is the challenge, and we're trying to put in different forms of knowledge. And there's, in a monodisciplinary setting, we have knowledge that really fits into the question and the challenge we're dealing with. But when we move to, say, a multidisciplinary, then we have different types of knowledge needed to address a question, but it stays in its own lane. So it's fairly clean, and there's this distinction of what my role is and what your role is. Now, that gets more challenging when you look at inter and transdisciplinarity, because with interdisciplinary, it is about this integration, so bringing together, because neither of these shapes fit the type of problem that you're dealing with. And with transdisciplinary, it's even more shapes going on, and they're moving. So it's not stationary, it's not staying in this nice place. So you can see that it's more difficult. You also have, in addition to these, within science, disciplinary knowledge, you have these green circles that are needed to be part of these processes, but how to engage with them and how are they affecting each other is not as clear in the process, but also how it turns out, because then the outcomes of it can help fill in these parts, but it's not necessarily a perfect, clean fit. There's also changes of ourselves and others while we're doing that, so that we may take on different forms of perspectives, different forms of knowledge, and different ways of engaging in it. So just to recap that, I think that was some really important features of inter and transdisciplinarity is the fact that these problems are not as they do not fit the existing forms of knowledge streams that we have. They also have processes that are not as straightforward or not following the existing ones, and then really require integration of different knowledge at different times within the research process. So yes, so going back to that, during the Nijmegen Agenda, one of the things was looking at new and different ways of relating. So in this innovative session, we wanted to talk about where we were coming from, but how do we get out these different stories or ideas of that in a way that that comes together. And I think that Anna really nicely already illustrated some of these potentials of narratives and theater and coming into these different roles to bring these core issues to the forefront, because we all come with these different expertise and we have an idea of how they look, but we have to also find ways to bring them together and make sense of them together. So what was really important in this was this opportunity to bring different ways to relate, and so that's why one of the reasons why I was brought onto the team is because I engage in a lot of different types of innovative and interactive sessions. And so we were using metaphors, and this was a part that Berka was leading, and using these metaphors to capture some of these narratives that the different participants brought in. Another thing was about getting to our meaning, because one of the other challenges is we have these different epistemic knowledge, and we have different definitions, and making the Nijmegen Agenda, one of the in the drafts that we were working on, it was like, what are we meaning, and how does that make sense to our community? But how does that make sense beyond the ESG community if you're wanting to engage with more people? So one of the other activities that we had was making our kind of mission statements through haikus, because haikus have the power of capturing a lot of different ideas in a very short form, and challenging us to think of like, what is our core message here? Because we can get lost in semantics, and if you're trying to engage with different knowledge perspectives within the academic context, but definitely beyond academic context, we have to be able to get to the core of our meanings and not hide it behind different definitions or long statements. Another thing in this relates to these new stories. So how can we change the stories and look at new ways of doing things? Because the type of science that we're doing it is not addressing fully the transformations that we want to see happen. So we need to have a transformation. There's more than what we know and see now, and I think that was really nice what Anna was touching on with the democracy, that what other ways could we think about how we engage with the animal kingdom when we are making rules, laws, and engaging with cattle and food. So this is also thinking about these stories. How can they change when we are working on Earth system governance in relation to people's daily lives and the changes that need to be happening? Another part of it is that it can be really inspiring, these ideas of collaborations and bringing going forward with it, but then also recognizing what are we not doing to get there. And so at this part of the table, we're looking, okay, well, what are these things and these risk factors that can make this not happen or not go into the direction we want? And what are things that we're maybe doing that are getting us in this direction we want to go, don't want to go, or directions we don't want to go? And then what are some ways that we can actually take some steps to recreate our path, co-create our path together? So I think these were some of the parts of the discussions of the Nijmegen agendas. Okay, how do we then look at these challenges and risks, especially as this is a very there's different groups that have started this, but how do we give people space to feel a part of the Nijmegen agenda, and also to take ownership of it, and also to understand what it means within their research context? Another thing that's really important is this collaborative team dynamics. Now, I was really honored to be part of this team, and we know with a lot of research is that it's best to engage with everyone from the beginning. But reality shows that that's not really possible. We've been working on our different fields, and we need to bring on new people, new forms of knowledge. So we have already a bunch of embedded knowledge that we need to share. But what was really beautiful about getting part of this team, I was really kind of actively involved 2 weeks before the conference, and they gave me the opportunity to help think along with their sessions and with the agenda in a very short time. And it was really important that they were able to trust me, that I could also do this. And also it was really beautiful to see how they work together. So it was a really inspiring place that I think all of us wanted to kind of push further with what is possible. And so that doesn't just happen. It really requires the kind of willingness, openness by the different teams to be willing to engage with new and weird things, but also to appreciate the different insights that we can bring together. The other part of it was about this co-creating futures, because pathways or futures, that there's more and more ways that we can get to transformative sustainable societies. So we're also looking at, like, how do we create that, and what does that look like when we are creating it, and how can we make it more explicit what are different ideas. So in this part of the session, people were actually building it, but I think also one of the challenges, and this was something that we created, but this is very much part of reality, is there are people that started with creating this vision of how to, towards 2030 even, for example, create more inter and transdisciplinarity within the ESG context for transformative sustainability. But then when a next round came, they had to try to understand what was already there and also work with what is already there. And of course, it's really nice if we just get to start from scratch, but every time we are building on what is already there. So how do we then give space for future generations, for future researchers, for different types of knowledge, if we have these kinds of visions in place already? Now, I just want to, these are not the only challenges, but I think thinking towards our discussion, here's some 4 challenges that come to my mind with going forward with the research in the Nijmegen Agenda. One is getting out of our own lane and making room for others to merge into ours, because if we want to have these shared pathways, we need to be open to trying new things, going beyond our comfort zones. But we also need to enable other people to move into our space, which is also uncomfortable as well. So how do we then give these different spaces to, one, not just be an expert in what we have been researching and contributing to for many years, but also moving into different spaces. But then also, how do we enable people who are newer to our fields to also have a respected voice and input into it? Another one is about rethinking training. One of the things that I've been working on a lot this past year is a PhD course, because if we want to do different forms of knowledge, different forms of engaging, we need to also think about our training, and at all levels. And so this is one of the starting points is the PhDs, but it's not just the PhDs, it's, of course, it's the supervisors, it's the professors, it's the funders, but really thinking about, okay, how are we going to, what do we need to learn? How do we need to learn it, and how do we make it a deliberate part of our practices? Another, I think, big challenge in this is minding the gaps, because really with inter and transdisciplinarity, it's not following what is already so easily established and recognized and measurable. And we have in all of our works very important things to contribute already. And then if you have to be new at something or try something that doesn't work, that's very difficult. So how do we give space for these new places? Also, that Anna mentioned about having a sufficient budget for something that might fail or then will not be transformative in a very short term. And my last slide before I finish, sorry, I went over the very bit, is what does then the leadership look like? Because how do we then bring the inter and transdisciplinary forward if we are being inclusive, if we are bringing these different forms? Who is guiding it? Because I also see a real practical challenge that I've been encountering is, how do you make sure that you are inclusive, but also get things moving forward, and whose responsibility is that? So I thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much, Gillian, for showing the challenges also of working in an interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary manner, and also for rekindling some memories of the conference last year. I just noticed that I'm wearing the same shirt, but I am a year older. All right. So Jonathan, I guess like when you are part, of course, in the development of the Nijmegen Agenda, but one thing that also happened in the development of the Nijmegen Agenda is that the ESG project was mentioned quite prominently. The ESG project, according to the Nijmegen Agenda, can play a very important catalytic role, and also help us practice transformative and transdisciplinarity. That's a lot of responsibilities maybe that we put on the ESG project. So I would love to hear from you, Jonathan. How are you going to pick this up and facilitate all of this?
Sure. Thanks very much, Sander. And yes, congratulations to you and the team on producing and launching the agenda, which is, it's a great document. Really, I think a really timely call for action. And as we've heard from Gillian, what's great as well about it is the process by which it was developed too. There's a lot of energy and passion brought to the development of the agenda, and I think that that is reflected in how the agenda itself has turned out. And we sort of really appreciate just the effort that's gone into bringing the Earth System Governance community along. So I suppose if I sort of understand it rightly, I guess the agenda's audience is really, say, anyone who's working on Earth System governance or sort of related ideas, regardless of whether they happen to be a research fellow or the like. And I think that's great, and I really hope it's sort of taken up by those working sort of quite broadly on sustainability, the governance of sustainability, work on sustainability transformation. Of course, we have the sort of organizational elements of a system governance project, and we, aim to sort of foster that broader community. And so I think there's, I'll come in a moment to some of the specific points that the agenda raises for the ESG project to take up. But I guess one sort of brief thing to note is that I think the community, the ESG community, has a sort of promising basis to work from in this area of interdisciplinarity and transdisciplinarity with a transformation lens. So I guess some of those elements are taken up in the sort of science and implementation plan for the project. And there was one sort of quote that struck me a little, which said from the plan from back in 2018, it said, Earth System Governance Scholarship addresses rapidly changing issues that affect all sectors of society and should be and is engaged with and relevant to society. Deepening and refining this relevance, however, is the ongoing task of the Earth System Governance community. And I guess that's where I see the role of the agenda in really deepening and refining this relevance, but also sharpening it, particularly in the way that the agenda has this orientation towards transformation. So I think there's already a lot of interdisciplinary research going on in the community, but I think it's also fair enough to say that not all of it would necessarily have that clear orientation towards transformation, and that's I think definitely an area of opportunity. I guess on existing transdisciplinary work, well, I think we have strengths to build on here too, and of course there are the work of, say, those in the Nijmegen Agenda team. Not least under yourself, your work on, say, non-state actors and voluntary action in the climate regime. We have Ingrid's work on IPBES, and not least as well her work as a senator now, if I'm not mistaken. And Christina Inu, my fellow co-chairs, work with Indigenous peoples in the Amazon. She's doing some really interesting work right now on in the lead up to Brazil hosting COP30, looking at how the Amazon rainforest is being sort of invoked in this context. We have lots of examples, and of course the work of Frank Bierman as well, the Gupta on solar and geoenergy engineering. I could sort of go on, but I shouldn't. And that's not to say that we should be complacent about the work that we've already done and doing, but more that we have some promising examples to build on and to take forward. And we'll hear from Cornelia as well about work that's been going on, ESG collaboration, members collaboration with Future Earth. So in terms of taking the agenda forward, so there are a range of actions identified in the agenda. Some of you have read the agenda, will be familiar with these. So I'll just mention a few of them very, very briefly, and then sort of mention some reflections on these as well. So one being a membership category for non-academics. Of course, we have sort of research fellows, senior research fellows, but we could envisage, say, practitioner fellows or the like. Great idea, and I think reflects the interest that there is already from a number of practitioners working in that in the area. And of course, we have, say, think tanks, not just universities, that are research centres in the ESG network as well. So when recruiting for staff, interest in capacity for interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary management is, of course, important as well. And here, I guess it's important to flag that we have the International Project Office as a secretariat for our the network's operations, and so it fosters a range of engagement activities and so on. It's in a process of transition at the moment, and so in part that poses a bit of a challenge for us in taking some of the proposals forward immediately, but it's also an opportunity as well, because we, in our discussions with potential hosts, we've been highlighting that this agenda has been in the works, and that we would be keen to take it forward. And I think that is a great opportunity for future hosts for the IPO. Hopefully, we will be able to announce some news on that very soon. So there are some other points about, say, the IPO and its role in being a resource essentially for developing interdisciplinary, transdisciplinary research proposals, developing a register of best practices, and so on. And I think perhaps to pick up on a point Julian made about the sort of educational element as well, or the capacity building element too. We have a vibrant ECR network, and I think there's a lot of interest there in, well, how do I do transdisciplinary work? How do I do interdisciplinary work? And so I think that sort of knowledge exchange is vital as well. Perhaps the final point was about publication formats and communications that help to bridge sciences and societies, right? To pick up on that, the motto of the conference, policy briefs, blogs, and I would add as well, I guess, those sort of timely research syntheses that can appeal to policymakers. I think Future Earth has some good examples of this with the insights from climate science, and I think there would be some other areas, say government-specific ones, that we could pick up there. So there's, I'm sure, more could say about this, but I guess just two forward-looking things. One is, of course, we have the range of task forces and working groups that are really much the lifeblood of the network, and there's a lot of opportunities there for them to take forward the agenda in their work. And with next year's conference as well, it will be pick up on Anna's point about conferences. We have that the 2025 conference done in conjunction with the Transformations community, which likewise has a really strong interest in transdisciplinary work. So I think there's going to be a really productive dialogue there as well. So I'll leave it there. But, keen to hear, so participants' ideas as well on how we could take this forward.
Mm-hmm.
And if you do have questions, by the way, please share them in the Q&A, and after the next input, there will be opportunity to discuss with the whole panel. But let me first thank you, Jonathan, for your input, and also to remind us that we're not starting from nowhere, that a lot of very promising things are already being done and have been done in our community, and there's a lot to build on. So yeah, very pleased to see how the project will also continue taking this forward. Cornelia, Future Earth was already mentioned, that in a way there's also transdisciplinarity and interdisciplinarity being practiced throughout the Future Earth community, and in your work you really also aim to bridge academia, society, policy making. So I would like to also invite you to share your experiences and maybe strategies to achieve more inclusive and impactful research.
Yes, thanks very much, Sander, for the invitation, and thank you very much for essentially that Nijmegen Agenda, because when I read it, it really resonated with me as well, because there's a lot of issues that you're touching upon that we actually grappling as well in other fields as well, as like how do we actually achieve the interdisciplinarity, transdisciplinarity that is needed to transform the society, to find solutions to today's challenges. And also, it's like the points that you're raising, I mean, I think we can actually take them up in various programs of Future Earth and say, okay, this is actually what we need to be striving for. So what I'm going to do, I've prepared 4 slides, mostly also for me to know what I need to talk about is like examples from my work within biodiscovery and Future Earth, but also as a science policy liaison of the ULPP, the University Research Program, Priority Program on Global Change and Biodiversity, how to actually link the science, in this case, particularly the biodiversity science with society and policy. And I'm going to start right off the bang with the World Biodiversity Forum, which is a conference that we initiated in 2020. We held the 3rd conference in 2024 in Davos this year, and it was really built as a transdisciplinary conference. So we didn't want to do another open science conference around the topic of biodiversity, but we really had this aim of like bringing together the academia with different stakeholders around the core theme of biodiversity, but looking at it through very different lenses and coming at it from very different angles. So the first conference we had talks like ranging from your like very traditional ecology, biodiversity science to the philosophy, talking about the rights of nature, and then coming back essentially to some of the discussions that Anne actually introduced in her talk. It's like, how do we actually ensure that nature actually has a place at the table and is able to exactly have a say in what we're doing. And then this year, what we had a big component on arts and science collaborations as well, and thinking about how science and arts can actually work together, shaping narratives, shaping visions, actually bringing this different understanding of the world. And then there's a lot of exploration of solutions. And I have to say, we have these big goals, but we still have a lot to do to actually get there. So most of the participants at the World Biodiversity Forum, they are very open-minded, but most of them still come from academia, and we haven't really figured out yet how to actually bring in the private sector a lot more, how to bring in different stakeholders, how to make actually space for that. And also the other problem that we have, and you can see it from the picture at the bottom of the screen, is like we're trying to build this like-minded, mega diverse community, but we're still having this big gap in the middle. It's like we have a very, we don't really reach out to the global south. And we've been thinking about now, how do we actually extend our reach? How do we actually make sure that the voices and the knowledge from the global south is actually brought to the table? What can we actually do apart from just like inviting people to come to our meetings, to see how we can actually strengthen this knowledge there as well? And another important point that also came up is also the different worldviews, knowledge types. So there's a lot of knowledge on biodiversity, in particular in indigenous knowledge, in indigenous communities, and those need to be at the table and actually share their views and visions as well. The other type of work that we're doing a lot of, and you've mentioned the 10 insights into climate science, there's actually just been a publication. It's only available as preprint, led by Friedrich Born and others in collaboration with the Future Earth community, on 10 insights or horizon scan of the biosphere science that is available now. I've been, or Biodiscovery and others has been involved in other policy briefs, some of them very specifically, how do I say, aimed at the countries while they were developing the new global biodiversity framework. When we were following negotiations, we realized there's a lot of questions around how do we actually, what are the targets that we should be formulating, what we should be, what actually countries should be looking at to actually achieve it. So together with Geobon, Biodiscovery actually produced a number of science briefs on biodiversity monitoring, on the links between biodiversity and climate change, on sustainable agriculture, sustainable use of biodiversity, actually synthesizing the most current biodiversity knowledge or knowledge in this field, helping countries actually to think about how do we actually then use this to frame the targets for the new global biodiversity framework. And then there's two other publication, the so-called 10 must-knows for biodiversity science. These are very focused to the German-speaking region. Also, what are the most important issues that we're talking about in biodiversity science at this time? There's one topic on food production, one chapter dealing with biodiversity and climate change, one chapter on education, sustainable education. And then another example I have for this is also that within Switzerland, we organized 2 years ago a policy brief on what we called in German is the Trendwende Biodiversität und Klima. So how do we actually bend the curve of biodiversity loss, and how do we actually get on the right track for the climate? So that was actually very much addressed to Swiss policymakers, looking at actually what's the status of biodiversity and climate in Switzerland, and what are your options for change. These syntheses are usually very specific. They respond to policy activities that are going on. They address very specific policy questions. But what we've actually found, or what I found, is politicians, they take them up and they're there, but then especially in the Swiss case, there's actually no follow-up whatsoever. We had this like big hope that following this like policy brief, we actually, and I'm going to pick up on this actually here in the dialogue, we actually had a whole event in the Swiss Parliament, speaking to parliamentarians and hoping that there would actually be a continued dialogue between science and policy, thinking about the current issues and how they could actually be addressed in Switzerland. And it happened 2 years ago. Now this year, actually just a few weeks ago, we had a vote in Switzerland on the biodiversity initiative, which was essentially an initiative to strengthen the conservation of biodiversity in the Swiss law. And it was rejected by the Swiss populace. And also most of the politicians actually said, oh, we have enough laws and regulations in place to conserve biodiversity. But if we look in comparison to the whole of Europe, I mean, Switzerland is like bottom rank in terms of funding spent on biodiversity conservation or areas actually under conservation. So there's actually a lot of work that needs to be done. But then there's other activities happening now. The Switzerland organizes the Swiss Green Economy Symposium every year. It's happening in Winterthur, which is close to Zurich. And this year, for the first time, they actually had an afternoon dedicated to biodiversity and what does it actually mean for business to become biodiversity positive. So they actually invited scientists to come for presentations and panel discussions to actually figure out what the problems are, how we can actually integrate biodiversity into business. And I think from there, they're going to be joint initiative thinking about how to actually support business in protecting biodiversity much better. And then the other thing that's actually quite important to me as well, and that has been mentioned by Gillian as well, is education. And education actually running from primary school right through to continued education and essentially science communication with the public. What I found that at the university is, I mean, we at the University of Zurich, we just initiated a new study program in biodiversity. With the aim to actually help students address the biodiversity crisis, learn about biodiversity, and then fill these positions that are needed to do this. But then if you look at the curriculum, it's very disciplinary. It's very much focused again and rooted in the natural sciences. Of course, you need to have the basics in biology. You need to know your species. You need to have the physics and the mathematics, whatever, but there is very, very little about transdisciplinarity, transdisciplinary approaches, actually bringing in aspects from law, from philosophy, and that's actually, I think, really lacking, and we need to bring this in a lot more when we're teaching. And then also, likewise, we need to bring the knowledge, but in our case, the biodiversity knowledge into the other subjects as well. So I've been lucky enough to actually give lectures in seminars in the German Institute, so German language, also in the finance, but I think we need to do a lot more of this cross-disciplinary, transdisciplinary teaching. And that's something that Gillian, I think you showcased really, really nicely how this could actually be done. And I would like to see much, much more of this at university level, and not just at PhD level, actually beginning from bachelor level, bringing this thinking in. And then the other important thing is actually always the science communication. You can see some pictures there from an outreach program that was actually attached to the research program, priority program. It was called Biodiversity Means Life. And it actually was aimed at the public, and it's like educating the public about the research that we're doing within the program and the importance of biodiversity. And it is actually this conversation starter, getting to know people, getting to know their way of thinking and actually learning about their knowledge, and then also that broadens our own knowledge as well, and it helps us understand how we can actually change the way we thinking and communicating. I think with this, I would like to end and with the experience that I have made, and I look forward to the discussions that we're going to have. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Cornelia, for sharing your experience, showing what you and Future Earth is already doing in conferences, for instance, through publications, through science communications, like the many things you're doing, but also to point out the challenges, right? You mentioned, for instance, the challenge to really be inclusive, also of the global South, and also how to continue dialogues and make sure that, you know, what we do is also somehow picked up, right? So these are things that we certainly can and should discuss after all your insightful inputs. But I think at this stage, it's also good to remind everyone who's in this meeting that you can pose your question in the Q&A, and we will keep track of it. And when you pose your question, you can briefly state your name, affiliation maybe, and make sure also to tell us who you address your question to. If I may, maybe I can ask a first question maybe we can start with Gillian. You discussed like very practical options, right, to how to facilitate inter and transdisciplinarity, and those practical steps, like we try to also kind of kickstart through or inspire to in the Nijmegen Agenda. And the Nijmegen Agenda ends on a very important note, and that is about fostering a culture of transformative inter and transdisciplinarities. How do you see, because cultural change is very difficult, how do you see cultural change happening? How can we contribute to cultural change?
Thank you. And not an easy question to answer, but thank you for that. And also, I think picking up on what kind of each of the panelists have discussed, there's different ways that we need within our own kind of capacities to bring it a little bit further. So not just expecting the different committees or different projects to do that all, but for us all to give space. So within within my own, I'm working, say, more on the PhD education, but I've been working a lot with people who focus on the bachelor. I also do some masters, but also engaging with staff. But I don't engage directly with school-age children. But looking for these opportunities, so I keep going to different types of events. So not just staying within the ESG community, but having bringing people from outside other communities into the ESG community, and vice versa. I think that can be really helpful in building our capacities, because then people can appreciate more what is happening with their systems governance and why they want to engage with it. So I think that's important. Also, I think we recognize there's things that we want to do or see that is important in making transformations, and there's things that we do or spend our energy on, and it's very difficult to say get rid of all of that, because there are those limitations. But I think each of us challenging those a bit. So what if I want to continue having a career in academia? These are some of the things I need, but what could I do to challenge that a bit so that there is more space for the real things that do need to happen. So it's not just about, yes, I want to make a paper, but maybe it's also it's more important at this moment to engage with the community, or to give budget and time for reflexivity, or to invite different people in earlier to learn how to co-create research questions. So I think different parts of the community have different capacities as space for that, but by us all trying to give each other more space for different ways of doing and thinking, I think that's an important part to changing the culture, because one person alone won't change it. It can inspire it, but it won't be enough.
Yeah. So basically, we need to also draw from our diversity in a way, right? Which also makes me think of Anne, your input. I mean, you gave the example of also the session that you organized at the Nijmegen Agenda, actually. And one thing that you pointed out was, well, you pointed out several things. The importance of epistemic humility, the need for rethinking, for instance, also how we govern things like interspecies democracy, you said, is absolutely necessary. And then you also point out challenges, right? That people have to get used to the roles that they should play, maybe in those contexts. So after this experience at the Nijmegen conference, the Radboud Conference on Earth System Governance, what barriers, or what did you learn from that session that you would do differently now, or where you see opportunities to kind of share with us and hopefully make more commonplace in our community?
Yeah, thank you for the question. My cat is now also joining me to make this an interesting panel. Yeah, I think I have after that session, I had a lot of ideas and what I would do differently, and it was a wonderful experience. And I think in the future, if I had more time and also a more budget, because if you want other people involved, and now they were participating for free, and that's okay because this was their hobby. But if you want sort of regular citizens, I think if you want it to be accessible to participate for everyone, also people in poverty, for example, then I think it would be good if you could pay them, for example. But that was not possible within the consortium that I'm part of to fund that. And also to spend more time, because I think it would be nice if you can spend a lot more time with cows. For example, to really work on that attunement. And now we had like one afternoon with the cows. And to be able to create a space that really is more immersive also for an audience. So maybe not have it at the university, but have it, there's like a cow sanctuary in the Netherlands, have it there. Yeah, but that's of course a lot more expensive. But in a previous performative installation that I did it at 2 sites, and with one there was a lot more budget than at the other, so the staging was a lot more elaborate, and that really made a difference for how people experience it. So based on that, I have experienced that it really does matter. And then I think also we need to change the culture, as you were mentioning before, that these artistic practices are not nice add-ons to the conference, but that the knowledge they yield is valuable, just like traditional scientific knowledge that we also like. And I have given some guest lectures on this, and it really matters who you're talking to. So if you're talking to maybe theater students or even social sciences, that's so much different from, I don't know, biology students who will say, yeah, but there are so many variables. This experiment can never yield any valid knowledge, or but we can never really know 100% the truth about what cows think. So there really needs to be this change also in what is knowledge that starts, I think, as Jillian also mentioned, school-age children, it starts so early, where we already teach that humans are in a different category from animals, and nature is different from culture at such a young age, that we can change all these things practically in our conferences, but we also need to start somewhere else very early on. And I think we just need to do both and get at it from a lot of different angles.
Thank you, Anne. One thing that was mentioned, for instance, in Cornelia's presentation, was how difficult it is sometimes to engage also researchers and stakeholders and those people who are targeted also in the global south. And I wanted to ask Cornelia, but also Jonathan, maybe, like, what are you doing? Like, what can be done, maybe also, to address that epistemic imbalance or that epistemic injustice, often maybe also, and what do you actually run against when trying to address that imbalance or that epistemic injustice? Maybe Cornelia, can I ask you?
Yeah, so maybe if I can come back to the experiences we had with the World Biodiversity Forum, is that one big thing that you're running against, if you run a conference in Europe, it's always the funding. And then we were lucky enough to get funding for early career researchers from the global south to participate in the forum. So we were able to fully pay travel accommodation, and then we ran into visa trouble. So it's exactly. So it's so you've got the money, but then the people don't get the visa, and you ask yourself, why are they not getting the visa? If you write the letters, they're fully funded, and you're paying for this, that, and the next thing. And I think our solution at this time, at the moment, is that we actually think about how we actually create conferences that that link the different communities, so that we now at the moment thinking about for the next World Biodiversity Forum a model where we're actually going to have kind of satellite conferences leading ahead to the World Biodiversity Forum, so that we actually bring the World Biodiversity Forum to those communities instead of the other way around, and encourage actually others to go to those places. Then, of course, it has its own, problems, as ESG knows as well. If you try and then organize a big conference somewhere in the global south, you again run into other troubles. But I think that's the way of doing it at the moment. It's like the other thing that we've tried in 2022 is to actually run the conference hybrid. So we had lots of funding to actually create a hybrid conference, but still we weren't able to fill this gap, because then a lot of countries have trouble with internet connections, etc. So,
very recognizable, and I think certainly something we can also have a dialogue, a completely separate dialogue about. When we organized the Earth System Governance Conference last year, one thing what we learned was, and what we implemented, was to have closing deadlines for paper submissions, for instance, much earlier, to make sure that there's enough time for visa applications. But one thing is, basically, you have a system stacked against you that perpetuates the biases that are the reason for the structural inequalities we're dealing with. And I know that the Earth System Governance Project has been very vocal to kind of act out against it, or to kind of counter that. Also in the science and implementation plan, for instance, it's an explicit goal to make Earth system governance truly global, right? but maybe I can ask Jonathan, to what extent do you think this is really playing out, and how can that further be improved still?
Mm-hmm. Sure, thanks, Sander. And yes, I would say, looking back at the aims of the plan, I think the network has come a long way over the past, half a decade or so in terms of the diversity of the network, but it's still very much a work in progress. I think a lot of that a lot of the increased diversity of the network comes down to leadership of our colleagues who are on the scientific steering committee or the early career researcher committee, in engaging universities in the global south. I think our colleague Christina, for example, and the strong engagement of Brazilian colleagues in the network. We had and that's reflected in our recent conferences, I'd say, and there was say funding support for a number of colleagues from the global south to join the Radboud conference, which is great. But again, there's never enough funding to as would be ideal. The hybrid elements, I think, of our conferences have really been helpful too. And of course, next year's conference will be held in the Global South in South Africa, and I think there's a lot of opportunities there too. It will again be a hybrid conference. I guess more perhaps bringing it back, specifically to the sort of transdisciplinary elements as well, that the South-South initiative of the ESG project has really taken off in the last few years, and that's also another forum where these discussions are happening about, how do we engage with broader societal actors? There's stuff happening. There's a lot more we could do though, and again, I think the agenda is a real spur for us to do more in that area.
Thank you very much, Jonathan. And unfortunately, we're running out of time. However, I would like to thank all of you who joined this session, and especially, of course, our panel. Thank you very much, Anna, Gillian, Cornelia, Jonathan. But I would also like to thank the committee that prepared the Nijmegen Agenda, the first draft at least, because it was a co-creative process, so a lot of people have contributed. But the first draft was a collaboration with Ingrid Visser-Hamakers, Birka Wikke, Christina Inoue, Carlijn Hendricks, Arti Gupta, Catharina Rietig, Gillian, Ellen Chappell, Camille Thibault, Jane Butler, and I was also happy to play a role in it. We're very grateful also to all the people who have participated in the survey, in the innovative session, and in the consultation that all led to the Nijmegen Agenda. So thank you very much. And last but not least, please do check out the Nijmegen Agenda. You can find the Nijmegen Agenda, let me see, on the website of the Earth System Governance Project here. You can also follow the QR code and find it that way. For now, I would like to thank you all. Thank you, and hopefully see you soon at another session in the forum or at the next ESG conference. Thank you.
Thank you, Sander.
Thank you so much, and thanks everyone.
Thank you
Bye
so
bye.
much. Bye.